For tonight, we're going to start off with a presentation by Jim Malusa. And Doug mentioned that the theme for this year's meeting is Arizona native plants to the extreme. And I think if we could not have chosen a better talk to be the sort of poster child for extreme botany. So Jim Malusa is going to talk about an extremely rare plant, which lives in extremely difficult habitats, which has been impacted by an extreme fire event, and whose survey he will report on was conducted under extreme climatic conditions. And so I think Jim hits all the extremes in his talk. So Jim is a research scientist with the School of Natural Resources and the Environment at the University of Arizona in Tucson. He got his first backpack for his 16th birthday, and immediately as he recounts it, he sets off for the Catalina Mountains. And apparently he spent most of his high school years in Tucson poking around the mountains. However, he had this voice in the back of his head that kept saying, "You will never be able to get a job just hiking around." He managed, however, to silence that naysayer. And after a stint doing things like lid opening fry vats at Kentucky Fried Chicken and deconstructioning at Cro-Magnon Deconstruction, he drifted back into the academic world. He got a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and eventually a PhD at the University of Arizona. His specialty is plant geography and fire ecology, and he's going to talk to us about this rare onion, Allium gooddingii. Did I pronounce that right, Jim? I'll let you correct me on that. So let's hear from Jim.
Well, thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Doug. What an honor it is to be the leadoff hitter here for the Arizona Native Plant Society. And it's even better to have my plant for the night to be the onion. And everybody knows what an onion is. Onions are fabulous plants. The people plant them just for their inflorescences. Sometimes they look like fireworks like this, but onions are best known, right? Because you can eat them. And these are all the different alliums: the onion, the garlic, shallots, chives, and leeks, and they're popular throughout the world. And that is despite their I don't know what you would call it, their kind of stinkiness, I suppose, and their strong smell. And they get that from this compound, an organosulfur compound up here on the top called allicin. And if someone bites an onion, whether it's you or if it's an insect or anything, it turns into sulfenic acid, which is related to sulfuric acid, and that's what makes your eyes sting when you bite into an onion. It is a strategy that has resulted in a long evolutionary history, and it's pretty much onions are anti-everything. You've heard of probiotics. Onions are antimicrobial, antiviral, anti-diabetic, and there's a couple here I threw in myself to see if you could catch them, the ones that aren't really onion characteristics. But this has made them to be popular not only in your garden for just prettiness, but also they think they're good for you. They've been around for about 50 million years, at least 50 million years. Here's an onion, a paleo allium, that was found in the state of Washington and bears a very strong resemblance to an extant onion species that's in Africa, the Egyptian walking onion. So we know that being anti-everything is a good way to go if you want to be around for millions and millions of years. They're in the family, the Amaryllidaceae, and there's about 900 species throughout the world, and 96 of them are in North America. 13 to 15 in Arizona alone. And here's an illustration, a map from SciNet that shows that most of those are in the, Sky Islands of southeastern Arizona. You can see Tucson right over here, and they are scattered all about, and at all elevations. They're in the desert. They're on the mountaintops. Here's some of the onions you might see just walking around in the mountains and deserts of southern Arizona. the Allium biseptum, the nodding onion, here's a desert onion, macropetalum. And if you go up into the Catalina Mountains, just north of Tucson, you're likely to see this one, Allium gooddingii. And I mentioned the color of its anthers and its leaf width. They have narrow leaves, typically less than 5 millimeters, because that one stands in contrast to this one, Allium gooddingii, which I misspelled here. It has 2 Ds. And it has broader leaves, and the anthers, you'll note over here, they're either white or purple, but they're not yellow. So if you see an onion up there that has these characteristics, it's likely going to be this Allium gooddingii. The reason that Catalinas are important are because Allium gooddingii, as the Flora of North America points out here, is known only from the mountains of east central Arizona, New Mexico, and the Santa Catalina Mountains. That map really wasn't so good. There's a better one that's right off of SignNet, and you can see locations here in the Santa Catalina Mountains, about outside of Tucson. These locations, these outliers are not correct. They've just been misplaced. So the main populations are in the White Mountains, extending all the way to Escadilla Peak, and then over to Mogollon Baldy and the Gila Wilderness over here, up in the Chusca Mountains, on the Navajo Nation, which are little visited, but they are very high mountains. It's just as high as the Chiricahuas, 9,800 feet high. And then over here on the Mescalero Reservation in New Mexico. Now, I know all this because I've read the report that was done in 2019 by Glenn Rink. And he's kind of the onion expert now because he's been working for Fish and Wildlife on the range and survivorship of Allium gooddingii throughout the years. And he went and visited in 2018 many of the populations and found that they were pretty much wiped out by recent forest fires. And right here, like he mentions 3 of the EOs. EOs are populations formerly had 10,000 onions, and they had none. He couldn't find any. And so that's what's raised the concern in the Santa Catalinas, and that is because not only do we have the Aspen fire, but we also had the Bighorn fire. The Aspen fire was in 2003, and then immediately afterwards, another onion expert, Mark Baker of Arizona State University, he went into this reef of rock canyon, I'll call it. I'll show you a map in just a minute, and documented a fairly healthy population there. And then Glenn Rink followed soon afterwards into the same canyons and came up with pretty much a total population estimate of, I have to go back a slide, I'm sorry, I went too fast. He said 215 in Reef of Rock Canyon and 3,200 plants in Lemon Spring Canyon and 0 in Bill Williams Spring Canyon. And this last observation was actually just made by Russ Duncan during a 1990 spotted owl survey. He was looking for owls, not onions, but he's a fine biologist, and he noted that the onion was present in that canyon, but we had no population estimate. So let's see the reason for their concern. There are, in this, I'm referring to people like the Arizona Native Plant Society, Fish and Wildlife, everyone that's concerned about these populations that are much cut off from the rest of the population. For example, the Santa Catalina Mountains, from every other onion population in the state. There's none in the Chiricahuas. There's none in the Pinaleños, at least Gooding's onion. On the left, you'll see the Aspen fire severity. That was 2003. The green triangles show you where it found some onions. And on the right is the same map, but zeroed in. And you can see that the upper part of the Lemon Spring Canyon got burned severely. But on the other hand, the Reef of Rock Canyon, which is here on the right, did not get burned severely. And The Bill Williams Springs Canyon here in the bottom left did not get burned so severely either. But let's go look at the Bighorn fire in 2020. On the left, there's the whole Catalina mountain range there, and there's the populations. And on the right, you can see now that much more of this area burned severely. In fact, I'm going to compare the Aspen fire on the left to the Bighorn fire on the right. And you can see that far more of their habitat burned, especially in this upper Reef of Rock Canyon on the right, and Lemon Spring Canyon over here, further down slope, and as well as Bill Williams. And so the Glenn Rink was chosen to, through Fish and Wildlife, to do the survey again, because he had already done it in 2018. Now, Glenn I had met him earlier many years ago up in Flagstaff, and he knew that long, long ago, 25 years ago here, this report was. I went looking for Gooden's onion up in the Mogollon Rim, along with Peter Warren and Kafira. However, I had not worked on the onion for that next 25 years, and so I was surprised to get a call from Glenn asking me. He said, "Can you go up there and go look for those onions for me? Because I just don't have the time to do it this summer." And I said, "Well, sure." I thought I'd be working with someone else, particularly with Mark Baker, but it ends up Mark didn't have time either. And so it ended up that I was going to go up and do it by myself. And of course, I got someone to help me. And before they went with me, I said, this isn't going to be an easy place to get to. This is the north side of the Catalinas. You're looking at here a Google Earth image. There's some imagery trouble here with Google Earth. They have a winter imagery here with snow, and then a summertime without. But you can see that the routes just drop right down the mountainside. This is the Bill Williams, and that's the Lemon Spring, and this is the Reef of Rock. And in some places, this is a GPS track you're looking at. In some places, you can't even get a signal, and that's why there's a break in the yellow lines there. So it's going to be steep, and there's no trails, and it burned. So let's go down and start looking for these onions. This is what it looked like in the easternmost survey place, which is called Reef of Rock Canyon. This looking down slope, you can see it burned pretty ferociously just the year before this picture was taken in 2020. And so that's a lot of New Mexico locusts here, Robinia, mexicana. And just this slope I'm on is exactly the same as the slope you're seeing on the opposite side. And so these things are steep, but they're really not that bad. I mean, all you do is walk slowly, and you wear heavy leather gloves so you can grab onto that spiny New Mexico locust so you don't fall down into the canyon. And down I went. This trip I went with Joe Black. Joe Black's a young botanist who happens to live next door to me. And he was game for doing this. Once we got down to the bottom where the first population was supposed to be, we ended up, the canyon bottom looked like this. And so obviously there had been some slope movement and some debris flows, and downstream it looked like this. Now all of the onion had previously been recorded from the stream bottom, which doesn't look anything like it did, I'm sure, before the Bighorn fire. So the habitat here has been totally wiped out. And it was a pretty grim start to this trip. We proceeded further down slope, and you can see Joe up here standing on the logs up here. You have to have good balance to go looking for these onions, but it was a very, very, very disturbed site, and I didn't think we would be seeing any. We continued down slope further, and you can see it's completely scoured out the canyon bottom. But then we got to a place where things were different, and I'm going to show you a video here of the scoured canyon bottom. Looking down canyon. Many, many floods had come down after all the heavy rains of 2020. But here was a waterfall. You see, when a flood comes over that waterfall, it jumps over the rock face itself. I'm going to get to the next slide. That's the same one. Here we go, I think. And there it is in the bottom left. So it did make it. Those are the onions. And those are actually just geraniums I took a picture of because they were so pretty. So we found, I can't remember, quite a few there. And some of them were fairly good size, but none of them were reproductive at this stage. These are all just survivors from the Bighorn fire, but they did make it. They did it in these very sheltered places that are where the floodwaters go over the top of them. Exactly like this. And so we were happy to just discover that. So we only found one plant where Rink had estimated 215 plants, but further down canyon, there we go, we found 41 of them. Then we retreated to the mountaintop to spend the night. Enjoyed an incredible show at sunset with lightning hitting Poosh Ridge in the background here. Perhaps a harbinger of what was to come the next day. By the way, Mount Lemmon got 43 inches of rain in the Pima County rain gauge just during the summer months, 43 inches. So let's go back to what I just told you. On the right here is the Reef of Rock Canyon. We found one plant up here, but all the population I found, the 41 plants were down below here, where, as you can see by the color here, the green and the light blue, they didn't burn. That's because rock does not burn. So they do have a survival strategy, it looks like, and that is to be in a place that cannot burn up. Now we're going to go down Lemon Spring Canyon here. And this is the 2020 Bighorn fire severity. And you can see up at the top here is this yellow and then green right up here because they did a back burn up here. And it's also very, very mesic up at the top of this canyon. How wet is it? Well, it looks like this, even after the Bighorn fire. And to give an indication of how mesic this is, this fern here, Ethereum felix, I don't know how to pronounce it, Felix femina, or lady fern. You only find this in the most coolest mesic places in the mountains of southeastern Arizona. So this habitat was still there at the top of Lemon Springs Canyon. So it's not surprising that we found a large population of surviving onions here. And these onions were not only thriving, they were all reproductive. You can see the purple flowers here scattered about. And Joe's got an envelope there, and we were collecting seeds that were later delivered to the Arboretum at Flagstaff for propagation. We found 180 plants where they estimated 200, which is probably roughly the same. Further down on Lemon Spring Canyon, it too had been ferociously burned up, and you can see what it looks like, dead logs all over the place. We did find scattered plants as we went down. You have to get quite close to them. I have binoculars to help me do my surveys, but it's like this is an example. There's allium on the left, but there's lots of bromus here, grass, and from a distance it looks very similar. And so you have to get fairly close to see which one is which. As we got down closer to where Rink had found many plants, suddenly though there was a change in the weather. As you can see, there's an approaching storm here. The canyon bottom had been completely filled in with, this is all monkey flower down here in the bottom of the canyon. And now I think the weather is going to change. That made it harder to do surveying. And we found just below that point where the storm smashed us, the large population, that was on these cliffs above the now running stream. And it was very hard to figure out which was bromus and which was allium. We estimated over 100 plants that were on this and many more downstream, but we could not go further downstream on this trip. And so we retreated. I came back the next week with my wife and my son, and this time we're going to go to Bill Williams Spring here on the furthest west side one. That's my wife, Sonia. She's a geologist. There's a rock that she fell in love with and actually put in probably my pack to have to carry back up the mountainside. There's my son, Rudy, next to a large burnt Doug fir. And there's Bill Williams Springs itself, which is an interesting little spring house that's well down the mountainside. There's a power line that went down there and a pipe. And inside this smashed shed is an array of empty light sockets. So apparently the way they kept the spring from freezing in the winter was just to have a whole bunch of like 50 light bulbs inside of here that kept the inside of this warm. And the water then went up to the Air Force radar installation on the top of Mount Lemmon. Well, we proceeded down past this through lots of habitat that looked favorable, and similar to the last ones we had seen, including with large rocky areas that hadn't burned up very much. As you can see, this is very, very steep here. Here's the bottom half of my wife on the upper right. And yet we didn't find any here at all. And so the population or at least the one plant that Russ Duncan found in 1990, we could not rediscover. We went down 1,500 feet down the mountainside and did not find any more allium. So there were 0 onions in Bill Williams Canyon. So here's the summary of the survey. We found, we estimated 324 plants back as compared to 300,415. So only 1/10 of them are still there. But the onion's ability to survive on these mesic rock ledges bodes well for the future. As long as things don't change and you keep getting more and more fires. But if things stand as they are, I felt pretty good afterwards. I didn't know if there'd be any onions out there, or if there'd be, or if they would all be there. But it looks like in areas where they lived in the stream bottom, they did get wiped out unless they were protected by these rock waterfalls where the floodwaters rush over the top of them. And I don't see any reason why, if conditions continue similarly, that they will not start reproducing in those other canyons, in Reefer Rock Canyon, and proceed to come back to their prior population levels. So I'm going to go back in 3 years, and I'm hoping that someone watching this slideshow will say, that's exactly what I want to do. And I'm happy now to take any questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Jim. So I have a couple of questions that have come in on the chat for you.
Okay.
But you certainly lived up to my predictions of an extreme event here. The first one is about the onions in the White Mountains. So it says, with the current population of the onions in the White Mountains, is there concern with the regular prescribed burning activities that might harm the population?
Oh, yes, there is. And they have the Forest Service is supposed to abide by a rule now that they have to be, depending on the exposure and the slope, it's either 100 feet or 100 meters from any known population of the onion. So they're aware of the locations of them. Whether or not they really do that, I suppose you have to have someone go monitor them. But they are aware of the onion populations. They don't want them to be listed. They're not a listed species right now. They're a Forest Service sensitive species, which is different.
Uh-huh. So how would the Forest Service go about doing that in a burn situation? Would they use a drip torch and work away from that, or would they have a monitor? What would be the protocol for trying to protect a population like that?
Well, without knowing for sure, you hit upon it the very first time, right? They would use a drip torch and burn it out from the onion population. which are typically in areas that, that don't burn very well, right? They're going to be at the canyon bottom, and so I can't be sure. The actually, Glenn Rink did find them in areas that were surprisingly unmusic canyon bottoms. They can be on sunny slopes sometimes, and so perhaps there are, there's some plasticity in their offspring and the kind of habitat they prefer, that we're used to seeing them only in fairly cool music places, but they've always had the ability to also exploit sunnier locales, at least while they're competitive in that situation. And I wish I could tell you more about their population ecology, but I've only been an onion expert for about 6 weeks now.
Well, you can still develop hypotheses, I guess. So I guess one of my questions was, do they have any kind of edaphic restrictions? Like, are they found on certain kinds of rock? Have you noticed any kind of association with the geology?
No, I haven't. In particular, for example, in the Santa Catalinas, they're on metasedimentary rocks are on quartzite on the north side of the mountain. It's very different than what you see when driving up the Mount Lemmon Highway. While in the White Mountains, they're going to be more on igneous rocks, and that would be the same in the Gilas. They're also volcanic. The Chuscas, I have no idea what they are, to tell the truth. But at least comparing the Catalinas to the others, there doesn't appear to be an edaphic preference.
Okay. Another question: are the onions considered a sentinel plant? And I'm not quite sure what the question asker means here, but are they a food source for a particular species around them? Are they, maybe she means a keystone plant in some way in terms of the ecological system?
Yeah. I like that phrase, a sentinel plant. I suppose they're on the lookout for something. They can be browsed or grazed. There's some concern. There's a leek moth, which is an exotic species that is up in the northern, that's in Idaho and some other places, that potentially could be a predator on the plant. It's the caterpillars from that moth, and
on the vegetation, on the leaves.
Yes, they eat the leaves.
Uh-huh.
But no, I mean, I suppose they're kind of a lookout plant in the sense that they're restricted to some of the most music places in southern Arizona, and they would be the most threatened by drying and warming.
Okay, so that's another, aside from fire, which is sort of a crisis situation, long-term changes could potentially impact them. Here's a question about the rooting of the onions. Do the onions survive by sending their roots deep in the rock crevices? I would think rocks heat up in a fire, or are the survivors typically along wet areas?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I was very hesitant to disturb any of the survivors because there weren't that many of them. But in some places they were scoured, and you could see the rhizomes, and it looked to me like, I think if you were right in the thick of it, you would end up being a roasted onion, and you would have died, because it's right just below the surface if the fire was severe enough. But that's just a continuum, right? There were areas that were just completely rock. And as that waterfall I showed, I don't think that the fire. I mean, I'm sure it was plenty warm, but I don't think it burned up.
Right.
And so, if they're on the forest floor with pine duff and things, I don't think they would make it if it was a severe fire. But otherwise, they stand a good chance.
So I realize you said you're a 6-week onion specialist, but I guess one of my questions from a biogeographic standpoint is, how much habitat do you think might be on, say, Mount Lemmon that's not currently occupied by the onion? Is there, barring some additional events, would there be the possibility for this population to spread actively and colonize new locations?
Gee, Lynn, you got the greatest questions. And wait, I just looked at the calendar. I'm actually an 8-week onion specialist now.
More expertise. Yeah.
Bill Williams Canyon, I think, it was spotted there once before. Who knows if there was one or more, but that would be a great place to reintroduce the onion. It had been there previously. We've collected seeds. I don't know. I had several hundred seeds. So if that's a success, I think that would be a great place to try to transplant them. Other places, it's kind of a mystery. Why aren't they in the Pinaleños? Why aren't they, right? Which has got lots of high, cool places.
Well, and another question that came in is a question about whether they're in the Santa Ritas or the Huachucas. And we saw from the map that they haven't been collected there. But do you think that's because of lack of looking, or? And no, if it's not, why aren't they there?
Yeah, I don't think they're there. Glenn Rink looked all over the Pinaleños and some difficult to get places. It could be. It's such spectacular is kind of an overblown word, but a noticeable plant. I think anyone walking down, there's not that much very mesic habitat. I mean, I personally have been down many of the wet canyons in the Huachucas, in the Santa Ritas, looking for example, lemon lilies. I've done extensive lemon lily surveys, and I think I would have seen it. And does that mean they couldn't be there? I don't think so. I think we should just wait 3 years and see if they rebound up in the Catalinas. Or get someone like Doug, who's retired and has plenty of time to go plant them.
There you go, Doug. That's your project for next summer. So here's another comment about the distribution. One person wanted to know, are the populations on the north slope, are there any on the south slope? Is it not mesic enough? The canyons you described are all sort of branching off to the north or northwest.
They're all steep north-facing slopes. Yeah, it makes you wonder why they're not down in the wilderness of rocks. And I've talked to some people that say, "Oh yeah, they're going to be down there. You just haven't found them yet." But I haven't found them yet, and I've hiked down all the way down Sabino Creek without the trail from Summerhaven all the way to Sabino Canyon down the creek. My brother's gone down Lemon Creek, and we haven't seen it. It could be in there. For sure. And so we need some young native plant biologists to get down there. And I see a whole list of people here that I can just pick one. How about Michael Chamberlain?
Well, Frank Rickenbacker commented that there are no alders in the Huachucas or the Santa Ritas. And I guess he's probably alluding to the fact that alders might be an indicator of the kind of wet habitats that you were describing in the Catalinas.
Oh, yeah. That's a very good point, Frank. Frank really knows his stuff, too. I didn't even know that. So much for my expertise. There are no alders in the Huachucas or the Santa Ritas. Yeah, and there's plenty of them in the Catalinas as well.
And then we have one more question about the leek moth, and that is about whether the leek moth sustains itself on cultivated onions, or is it a parasite, an herbivore of other wild onion species, or is it's not unique to gooddingii, is it?
No, and in fact, I don't know much about the leek moth other than it's listed as a threat to cultivated onions, but I can't imagine it being picky.
Right. I can imagine that it's probably more generalized.
Yeah.
Well, great. Thank you so much for your insight into this really interesting plant and its natural history. And you've got 3 years now to learn more about onions for your next trip out. And Paula Redinger, who asked questions about whether they're on the north or south slopes, said she would be glad to do it. So you might want to write her name down and be in touch with her.
I'm doing it. Right now, I see it. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to the posters coming up here.
Great. Yeah. Thanks so much for your presentation.